Welcome, everybody, to the PDX Good Old Days Media Podcast. I have a very special guest today. It's Sharon Lacey, and Sharon was a producer at KGW when I first started as a sports reporter back in the early 80s. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I have to say that nobody knows who I am because I was always behind the scenes. Plus, my real name's Sharon Lacey, but since becoming a comedian, I switched it to Sharon Lacey because no one could pronounce Sharon Lacey. But watching all of your podcasts have been just amazing. But I thought, there's one person that you really ought to interview, and that's Carl Click. So I'm glad here today to switch it up on you.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up because I thought, I got a lot of good stories I'd like to tell, but I need somebody to interview, and I'm so happy that you are going to do it. I appreciate you suggesting that, and so now take it away. You are the investigative journalist interviewer.
Well, I've learned a lot about you just listening to and watching your podcasts that you've done. You've done like about 12 of them now, I think, of the Portland area anchors and reporters, and they've really been great. But I've learned some really great things about you. I didn't know that you grew up in Vancouver.
Yeah, that's funny, Sharon, because I did grow up in Vancouver, watched Portland media all my life. We kind of consider ourselves Oregonians over there in Vancouver, and other than going away to college, I lived there for the first 57 years of my life before Jill and I retired, left there, and came to Central Oregon. So born and raised Vancouverite.
Let me say also, you don't even look like you're 57. You still look like you did when the day you came in for your internship.
Oh, that's good because I'm 60.
We've had very parallel lives, it seems.
I think that's cool.
We both were interested in media and we did on-air things and writing in high school. And then we both, did you major in radio, TV, mass communication? What did you major in?
Yeah, it was a communications degree, but I got a second major in education.
Okay, so we both did internships. Mine was at King TV in Seattle, and yours was at KGW. And then we both had careers, mine very short in TV and radio, and yours much longer. And then I switched to teaching middle school, as did you at the end of your career. And now we both do a little bit of comedy. So I think it's really interesting how parallel
I think that's cool. I think you get a lot more credit for the teaching because you did it for decades. I did it for three or 4 years, and I'm still doing some student teaching or some substitute teaching now. But bless you for teaching those middle schoolers because I know how tough that is.
Well, it was fun. What did you like about teaching?
When I got out of TV, this job opened up at a middle school in Vancouver for a video production class. And what I liked about it was I liked teaching that to kids because it was fun. It was, it wasn't math, it wasn't social studies. But it also, to be a good storyteller with video, you have to be a good writer. And so I could, sneak in some tricks on, hey, this is how you need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that kind of stuff. So I really loved teaching them that. And I would say about a third of the kids were really into it, and they got really creative, and I just loved seeing what they would do. The middle third was just kind of there because it was an elective they had to take. Then there was a bottom third that was difficult to handle, and I hope, okay at that. I wasn't as experienced as the other teachers I was around to handle those kind of kids. I'm getting better at it now as how to let things roll off my back. But I thought it was fun to teach that discipline.
I bet your students really loved you.
I hope so.
Yeah, although I had to teach subject matter other than radio, TV, I used a lot of that. I had my students making broadcasts, so it was I
think we came to your classroom a couple times for stories when you had special projects. The kids would dress up in costume and put on kind of a living history. I remember coming there, Sharon. That was fun.
Yeah, I do. I remember that. So you have had a lot of interesting stories. You've covered some interesting stories, and you have some interesting stories.
Can I give one first? This one you don't know about, okay?
Okay.
This one's about you. Okay.
Uh-oh.
And this is one of the reasons I'm glad that you are doing this interview with me, is because I wanted to tell the story and I wanted to share it with you. Um, when I was, after my internship, I got hired there and I was a sports reporter. You were producing the weekends.
Mhm.
And did you do both the 5 and the 11 or just the 5?
The 5 and the
Yeah,
11.
I mean, that's a big job. Okay.
Yeah,
And
with
the
no news on the weekends.
Yeah. So the sports guys, we'd have about a 4 or 5 minute block, and every once in a while, I would be filling in when the weekend sports guy was not there. You know, at first it was Scott Lynn, and then he moved up, and then it was Dave Sullivan and Joe Becker, and um, but Sharon, I remember in those early years, I used to interact with you,
Uh-huh.
and we had a good interaction, but I would call you sweetheart. And and I say, hey, sweetheart, I need an extra 30 minutes, or sweetheart, that was a good show. And I don't know why I did that, but I did it. And I want to remind you how you handled it. Is after, a few times, you just I remember where you were sitting when you told me this. You said, Carl, I don't like it when you call me that. And I'd like you not to call me sweetheart.
Wow.
And I said, I thought, well, I'm sorry, I won't do that anymore. And because you did that, I actually thought about it. I said, that is really stupid that you're doing that. I mean, I thought it was like a term of endearment or friendship or
Yeah.
something like that, but it was not. And I wasn't your boss, and I wasn't, hey, sweetheart, get me some coffee. And because you said that to me, at that young age, I was probably 22 or 23. I kind of examined it a little bit and said, yeah, that sucks. And because you said that, I've never said that to another woman that I worked with. Um, and I thought that just wasn't a fair way to treat another woman a woman that I was working with. And I also appreciate the fact that you handled it the way you did. You didn't go to HR, you didn't go to your bosses, you just dealt with it. You just said, hey, I don't like that. It's not nice. Could you stop? And I said, yes, I'm sorry. And it affected the way I treated hundreds of other women the rest of my
Wow.
career. So I wanted to say thank you for that. And I was really just glad the way that you handled it. And I guess in retrospect, an apology for the few weeks that I did do that.
Well, no apology needed. In fact, I don't even remember that. So,
It is
but
true.
yeah, what I remember from my time working there is how very inadequate and inept and not ready for the job I was. Dave Claiborne is
Hmm.
the one who trained me, and because I had always been doing radio DJing, public affairs program, hosting that in television, writing and voicing commercials in a smaller market, but I hadn't done television news. And so Dave Claiborne trained me, and he was amazing, but he had this gruff, get in there and do it attitude. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be gruff, and I've got to prove myself as the woman who can really do that. It was all wrong. It was so wrong. I think the photogs hated me because I was stupid and
Well, but you were on an island too. You were there on a weekend with very little help, and you had 2 newscasts to produce. I funny you should mention Klager, and he was there when I started as well. I just always remember his voice. He was producing like the 5 o'clock, the main producer, and as I got close to deadline time, I could just hear him yell, "Scripts, scripts," because people didn't have their scripts in.
yeah. And Ann Curry was the anchor, the weekend anchor when I was the weekend producer.
Yeah.
And I was so stressed out all the time that I know my voice was just grating, and she hated my voice so much. She bought a Walkman and wore her Walkman the whole time that we were getting the newscast ready so that she wouldn't have to hear my voice. And I only know this because Tim Storrs told me.
Oh, really? That's why Ann got the headsets.
I mean, I finally proved myself near the end when I was ready to leave. I actually knew what I was doing, but
Yeah, you look like you knew what you're doing to me when I was there, Sharon.
so back to you. So what are some of the stories that really, and they don't have to be sports, although they can, but what are some of the stories that really stand out to you from your career?
The news stories that I did?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
news stories.
Well, events like the 1996 flood that
Mhm.
happened and basically shut down the whole city. that was one of the most major events. We weren't there when Mount St. Helens blew. I was still in college, but that flood in '96 was really. I mean, we were on the air. Brenda and Dave and I started the morning show, and we knew the flood was coming because of the water levels. We were on early. We were on like 4 o'clock in the morning, and we did our newscast, and we kept going past the Today Show, and I think about noon or something, they brought in relief, and the main anchor started doing things, and then they sent me out in the field, and I was down at Waterfront Park as the construction crews came in and started building that wall, that barricade with the barriers that kept the river from coming into the city. And I was there till 8 o'clock at night.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I've seen I have a picture of me, and of me on the air really late at 8 o'clock, and I'm white as a ghost. I look like I've been on the air since 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, and you were.
But I think that we did a great job covering that. We had the helicopter going around showing things, and we were on the air, and it really established us as a news team.
Yeah, I don't think anybody else had helicopters then in the local news, did they?
Well, they didn't have one that we didn't own ours, but we leased it, so we had it. Mike Roush brought the helicopter idea in, and we promoted it, and we had that camera on it that had a gyro stabilizer. So it showed things so much better than a news photographer who was sitting on, belted in and doing like this with a helicopter. Our shot was so good, and we had such great access to it because we had this lease on it, that it really made a difference. And man, that was a big day. That was huge. I covered Wesley Allen Dodd, even though I wasn't really. I covered his execution, I should say. I wasn't really
the serial rapist and serial murderer of little boys.
Yeah, he killed 3 little boys in Vancouver, and I didn't really cover the story that much because I wasn't a investigative news reporter and crime reporter like many of the great reporters we had. But when it came to his execution, I don't know if you remember, but he waived his right to any appeals. And Washington had a law that you could die by lethal injection or by hanging, and he chose hanging because that's how one of his victims died. And so the whole thing expedited. And so, we were going to cover it, and there were some people, they just didn't have quite the number of people. And I said, I'll go do it. And it was over in Walla Walla, the state penitentiary. And the reason that I volunteered for it was a couple of reasons. Is one, this happened in my hometown in Vancouver. And it kind of took away the innocence of this town that I grew up in. And so I wanted to see that finalized. And two, I kind of felt at that time, and I don't know if I've changed very much, that I've kind of been a supporter of capital punishment in cases like this. And so I felt, if that's something you feel, then you need to be willing to go over and cover the event. And so I was part of the crew that we sent over there, which was several different reporters and photographers. I think Jim Culp was the photographer that I went with. We got there the day ahead of time. We did an examination of, how the process works, last meal and all these kind of things. We had a courtroom artist draw pictures of what it might look like. And then we actually went into the prison, and there was a lottery to see who would actually witness the execution itself. And there were certain news agencies that were going to go in automatically, like Associated Press and the Columbian newspaper and the Oregonian. But the other 12 spots for media were by a lottery. And I didn't get chosen. I would have gone. No, I again, for those reasons, I think that I wanted to be there for that. But I didn't. So other reporters went in, and they came out, they described what happened. But I was on the phone with our Larry Shoup and Kathy Smith, I think were the anchors at 11 o'clock. They stayed on late because it happened at midnight. And I was on the phone with them, and I went back and looked at the tape. It was like for 40 minutes telling them what was going on, what was happening, what the reporters were reporting about the scene and all that kind of stuff. And that, that got done about 1 or 2 a.m. And then I was on the air again in the morning at 5 o'clock for our morning shows. Another long day, but a memorable one, because that was a really important issue in the Portland area and in my hometown. And and so I really remember that for sure.
Mhm.
And it was a statewide story, so we were reporting to Seattle and Spokane and every place when it was the first execution in Washington in the longest time.
Well, I think it was the first hanging since 1965 or something
Right.
too. I mean,
Yeah.
that was, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay, let me switch to another one. Tell me about Kenny Loggins.
You mean the time that I kidnapped him?
Yeah, you kidnapped him. What happened?
Oh, I love this story for many reasons, Sharon. So I'm in the newsroom and the phone rings, and you either have a direct line, you can pick it up, or the newsroom phone rings, and if people are busy, you pick it up. So I pick up this phone all by accident. This is how the greatest stories end up coming to the air. And there's a woman, she's a PR person for Kenny Loggins. She says, Kenny Loggins is coming to town next week. He's going to be promoting his album. He's going to radio stations. I wanted to get him on like your talk show. So I think she had us mistaken for AM Northwest at KATU.
Mhm.
And I said, well, we don't really have a talk show. We have a couple of radio stations, and but tell me what he's doing. And he comes to town and he goes to radio stations and he talks about his album and he plays some songs. I said, well, we don't have a talk show, but could I just follow him around for the day to show people what he does? Can I just be in the limo with him?
What a great idea.
And she goes, well, let me see, let me set it up. And she calls back and yeah, we're going to do that. So we're going to meet Kenny Loggins at the airport and travel around with him in the limo as he goes to 4 or 5 different radio stations to show what it's like for a music star to be doing that. And now this is the 90s. Kenny Loggins was the biggest music
huge,
star of the 80s.
huge.
Caddyshack theme song, Top Gun, Footloose. I mean, he was huge. But in the 90s, his career kind of slumped a little bit. So he was coming back with this new album. So, and this was back in the day when at the airport, kids, you could actually go out to the gate and meet the party you were going to see.
Yeah.
So Kenny Loggins gets off the plane and I say, hey, Kenny, I'm Carl Click. We're going to follow you around. He says, great. And I got a photographer with me, which was Tim Herman. And so we make our way out, and Kenny and his girlfriend get in the limo, and we get in the limo with him. And the limo driver gets some kind of instructions from the manager or the PR person, not the woman, but some guy, because Kenny had a little posse with him. He had this manager. He had like a roadie for his guitar, and he had an accompanist, a singer, and a guy that would play with him. So this happens, and then the limo driver goes, "Are we ready to go?" And Kenny goes, yeah. So we take off, and we're driving to this first radio station in a building downtown, and we know where it is, and we get there, and we go to the radio station, and our cameras, we're rolling on him, asking him questions in the limo, and he gets to the radio station, and he meets the general manager, and we're all filming this, and he does an interview on the air, and and I think he plays a song on the air for him, and then he's done, and he comes on out, and then they have him. We lost him for a second. He goes into this other booth to record, the radio thing that goes, hi, I'm Kenny Loggins, and you're listening to Cave 620 on your FM dial. And then Kenny peeks out and he goes, hey, Carl, Tim, you probably want to get this. Come on down there. He knows what we're looking for. So we go down and we shoot all that. And we've got everything we need, and we know he's going to be at Kink Radio in our building later in the day. And just as all this is wrapping up, the manager comes busting in the door. This is before cell phones, Sharon.
Uh-huh.
He goes, where have you guys been? And Kenny's around the corner, and he looks at me and he says, what are you guys doing? Because he and the guitar player and the roadie were all back getting the luggage and the van, and the limo driver was supposed to wait for him.
Oh,
and them.
Oh no.
So he thinks that we've basically abducted Kenny Loggins. Yeah. And
there was your lead story.
Yeah, we buried the lead. So he's just incredibly upset. And I kind of said, hey, we didn't do anything. The limo drivers drove her here. So he goes to the limo driver and says, you're fired. And we kind of, say goodbye to Kenny and sneak out and get out because we've got what we need. Well, I came to learn that that when Kenny does this, they don't use a limo. He just travels in the van with his people. But the PR woman thought that the limo idea would be better for the appearance. So the limo part of it was not what they were used to.
Yeah.
So we kind of got out of there. We had enough for our story, knowing that we were going to meet him again at the end of the day when he got to Kink Radio. And so we put together our story, and Tim's editing it, leaving room for this stuff. And the thing at Kink Radio was incredible because he basically Kenny Loggins did a concert of about 4 or 5 songs with his accompanying guitarist and singer. And they sent it out live for their station. And the whole Kink Radio, everybody in the department is there listening and applauding and things like that. So it was really a cool thing to see. So Tim recorded that a little bit and came back and put it at the end of our story. And then, before the news started, I went up and I said, hey, thanks, Kenny. We're all done. We got everything we need. And he goes, how's the story going? I said, well, it's great. Do you want to come down and see it? So Kenny and his girlfriend come down to the news. And so I'm rocking into the newsroom at 4:55. Yeah, here's my buddy, Kenny Loggins. Yeah. It's beautiful hair, and the guy's gorgeous. And they sat down in the editing booth behind Tim Herman as he finished the story. And I'm kind of around the corner, and I heard Kenny laugh a couple times at some of the lines I had written. And then he came out and he said, hey, that was really cool. You guys did a great job.
Oh.
And Sharon, it was like, here's a guy that I learned to play guitar because of House on Pooh Corner.
Oh.
And his song was in my wedding. And his music is the soundtrack of my college years. And for him to come into my world and see what Tim and I did that day and say, hey, that was really good.
Oh,
it's one of the most moving things I've ever had in TV. It was really great.
Absolutely. Oh,
so
wow.
Cool.
That's like, oh, that's great. And I know that you've kept in touch through the years with Kenny.
Well, my wife and my
calls you on your birthday.
Yeah, I wish. My wife and my sister went to a concert that he did about a year ago up in Washington, and tell Kenny hi for me.
Oh, that's funny. So the limo thing was kind of fake for Kenny because he usually did that. You were accused of doing a fake story once, weren't you? Or what was that about?
Well, that's interesting. This fake news thing that has become popular in the last several years during a current former administration really bothers me.
Sorry, I don't.
It should bother all journalists, I think. But one time, I did this story. It was like a Monday morning or something, and excuse me. It was just this lame story, and I don't know why we did it, but there were the DARE program, the drug program. They were having a march in Beaverton with all the kids in that school district who'd been part of the DARE program. Then they were marching down, with their DARE signs just to promote the program. And they sent us out to do a story. And, it really should have just been a voiceover, Sharon. It should have been just pictures. Hey, the DARE kids were marching and blah, blah, blah. Or maybe a VO bite with some sound in it. But for some reason, they wanted a whole story on it. And so photographer Tim Jacobson and I went out there. And the one thing I learned, been talking to the organizer, interviewing the organizer, was that all the kids were part of the DARE program, but they also had to do some community service to be eligible for the march. So they got out of school that day to go to the march. They had to do something. So I said, okay, there's a hook. I've got something. And so the kids are marching and we're going along with them. And I just go up to random kids and say, hey, what did you do to earn this? And one kid said, I raised money for charity. And then I went to another kid. What did you do? And I said, oh, I volunteered at the dog shelter. And what did you do? He says, oh, we did a bake sale. And so I had these, just to make this event some kind of story.
Yeah.
So I get to work either the next day, or I think I had a couple of days off, and I get to work, and there's an email from my news director who said, Carl, about your story on the DARE March, I got a call from a woman who said that her daughter was in the story, and she said that she did a bake sale to qualify for the march, and her daughter didn't do a bake sale. And the woman said, her daughter said the reporter told her to say that.
Oh, wow.
And now this didn't come I mean, he didn't call me. He left me an email, and it didn't come with, Carl, I know you wouldn't do this, but is there some explanation or something? It
Yeah.
just came with that right there, with
Wow.
you need to explain this.
Yeah. Oh,
And I do remember that now that I got the email when I got back to work on a Saturday, because I was anchoring the weekends with Nancy Francis, and I was so upset. I was physically ill.
mhm,
I mean, I couldn't concentrate on anything because that bothered me so much.
mhm.
And so I called the photographer. I called Tim Jacobson at home, and I said, Tim, that didn't happen. Did you were with me the whole time? We did not do that. And he said, no, no, there's no way we did that. And I actually had Tim type something out for me that said that. And then Tim and I remember, well, we still have the raw tape. So I got the raw tape of, the 30 minutes we shot, and I went through the whole thing, and Tim's with me the whole time. You see everything happen. I don't go up to a girl and say, hey, why don't you tell me you made a bake sale?
Yeah. Yeah. You can't think of anything?
Yeah,
How about a bake sale? Yeah.
exactly. It's all there.
Yeah.
And now this would have been, if I had done what this woman accused me of doing, it would have been at least disciplined, but probably fireable.
Mhm.
I mean, if it wasn't the most major news story, but I could be fired for that, and probably
Yeah.
should be, because
Yeah. Your credibility would have been completely
Yeah.
destroyed. And yeah.
if I did it on this story, I could have done it on any other
Right.
story that I've been covering.
Yeah.
So I explained exactly what happened and what didn't happen. I had Tim's note, and I had the raw tape, and I put it on the news director's desk, and I said, this didn't happen. I'd appreciate if you'd call the woman back and basically tell her. And I didn't see the guy for a while, again, because of days off. And I eventually came back, and I say, hey, did you get my explanation for what happened? And did you look at the tape and all that kind of stuff? And he said, I said, I read your note. And I said, well, did you call the woman? He said, no, I didn't. I just didn't think it was that big a deal.
Oh, come on.
I was so livid,
Yeah.
because he basically accused me of it.
Yeah.
And then, didn't say, I'm sorry, your explanation makes sense. I talked to Tim, nothing.
And in addition, the credibility with that woman.
Absolutely.
And anyone else she told this story to.
Absolutely, Sharon. I thought there's a woman out there who does, and this was like, I still had 15 years to go in my career. There's a woman out there who saw me anchoring the news for the next 15 years saying that guy's a liar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Oh,
I was,
geez. I'm so
this
sorry
is
that happened.
this is the same news director who once took a phone call from a viewer that said that we had misspelled the word battleground on the air.
Oh, that was me. I'm a spelling stickler, so
Yeah.
I called in.
Yeah.
No.
Because battleground is one word. And he sent out a memo to the entire newsroom and the weather department that, hey, we're screwing up battleground. Well, the woman was wrong. Battleground is 2 words.
Yeah.
And somebody leading a major market news agency should at least be able to look up what a source I mean, you've got all these reporters out there that are double checking, triple checking facts, and you can't check that. Needless to say, that was the news director, Sharon, that I got to tell I was leaving to go to KATU.
That must have been a little gratifying.
So it was 2015. I was anchoring weekends and reporting 1 or 2 days a week, and my contract was up. And I hadn't had that many contracts, but usually it was just almost an automatic renewal. They say, hey, we'll give you this pound of rate. I didn't have an agent. I wasn't going anywhere. So I didn't, negotiate very much or very well. Well, my contract, and they didn't come to me and say, hey, your contract is up. Can let's get this taken care of. And so my contract actually expired. It was January 31st. And I got contacted by KATU and Mike Roush, the former news director I'd worked for at Channel 8, about coming over there and anchoring their morning show, which I'd used to do at KGW, and to host AM Northwest, which I always wanted to do. I grew up watching that show. And so I went right into talks with them and agreed within a couple of weeks that I was going to move. I was going to leave KGW, where I was, born and raised on TV after 22 years, and I was going to go to KATU. And it's like, well, they'd move me from mornings to weekends a few years before that, and they're not coming to me about a contract. You don't want.
Yeah.
And so right about the time that I kind of finalized my deal to move to KATU, this news director comes and says, "Hey, Carl, your contract's up. We need to let me fill something out here, and let's have you take a look at it, and let's get you signed up and all this kind of stuff." And I said, "Okay." And they did. And this was like, my contract had been expired for almost a month, and I had a non-compete, which we all did in the business. And the strange things about the non-compete that I had was it said, you can't work at another station for 6 months after this date, which was the last date of the contract, January 31st. It did not say you can't work at another station for 6 months after the day you leave us. So I was now effectively working off my non-compete. So
and he didn't know it. You didn't.
He had no idea I was going to KATU at all. And it was a done deal at this point.
Yeah.
So I basically stalled out. I mean, I took the contract. I looked, I had it. So I'll take a look at it. And then in the greatest move of stealth, I avoided the man for 2 months. If he ever walked by my newsroom, I picked up my desk in the newsroom. I picked up the phone. And there were 2 ways to get down the hallway towards the front of the building, and one was the hallway. And I never walked down that because I didn't want to see him, because it would instantaneously, hey, what about that? I'd go back behind the sets in this back way and stuff. And so for 2 months, I avoided the guy.
Wow.
The one time that he actually, the one time that we actually came together was in the bathroom, standing next to each other at the urinal. I made a point to go to a restroom in the far corner, so I wouldn't run into him.
And he was there.
And he walked in, and so we're having that uncomfortable, two guys standing next to you. He goes, "Hey, what about that contract? How's that?" And I actually was not honest with him. I said, "It's with my lawyer, and I'll get back to you."
That was quick thinking.
Well, my brother-in-law was my lawyer, and I had shown him all my contracts, so it wasn't technically a lie, but I knew what I was doing. And so another month or so went by, and the assistant news director, who I really liked, was a good guy, Rick Jacobs. He came up to me and says, "Carl, we got to change your schedule from instead of having Thursday, Friday off, I need you to take Monday, Tuesday off, just because of stuff like that." I said, "Rick, it's not going to matter, because I'm leaving." And he kind of looked at me like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I'm leaving." And like 20 minutes later, the news director's down at his office, calls me, and I basically tell him, and I'd said, "Yeah, I'm going someplace else." And he said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm not at liberty to say, because the other place hadn't made the announcement of how things were changing there." And he tried to bluff me that he knew what I was doing or whatever. But the thing was, is I lasted long enough, Sharon, to get to May 1st. And now we're in a ratings period, and they didn't want to lose their weekend anchor in the middle of a ratings period. So I got to work all the way through May, and basically worked off 4 months of a 6-month non-compete.
Wow. Oh man. What a story. It all worked out. KGW's loss was KATU's gain, and
well, it was I had loved KGW, and it was a wonderful place to work, and I got my start there, and I learned how to do my job there, and I loved the people. It was nice to change stations, because when you go someplace new, all of a sudden you're wanted. I wasn't part of the furniture anymore. I was never neglected at Channel 8, but I was just Carl. He'd been there forever, and I wasn't but here, oh, yeah, it's so great to have you. Let's have you work on this show, and let's have you work on this special project. And people that I'd never really known, but like Rhonda Shelby and Natalie and Steve Dunn, and all the people at KATU, they welcomed me, and I got to do some new and great things. And hosting AM Northwest with Helen Raptis was a joy and just a career milestone.
And you two were such a good fit too. It was a real pleasure watching, but because you could really tell that you really both enjoyed your job, you enjoyed each other. It was a fun show to watch with you two hosting.
Well, thank you. Helen was so good at that. And she kind of, she mothered me along to be able to do that. It was great because there was a live audience. And, being a comedian, to be entertain a live audience is a skill and an accomplishment. It makes you feel good. And there were, each show had like 6 different topics. So you went from, a cooking segment to a serious journalistic segment to a travel segment. And I really liked it. I did it for about 2 years. We had to change because they took AM Northwest out of the news department and put it into its separate department, because they began doing sales segments where sponsors or businesses would pay to have segments on the show.
Right.
They also took the audience away for financial reasons. It was expensive to have an audience there every day.
That's too bad, though.
Yeah. And so I couldn't do both. I couldn't anchor the news and then be involved in those kind of segments. And so we had to choose. And so I stayed with the news. And I guess the best part of that is that Dave Anderson came in and hosted it for many years after that. And he was so good. And he was
what a guy.
He was such a good friend. I loved, I never mind handing it off to him because that was in his wheelhouse. He was so good at it.
It was. Dave was loved by everyone, and not only in TV, but in my new career that I started 16 years ago too, comedy. He was just an amazing comedian, and he could just ad lib like that. He had the audience in his hand, and he did a different show every time.
Yeah, because
that was really amazing.
His crowd work was really an artistic masterpiece. And I think, Sharon, that's the first time that I saw you after you left teaching, got into comedy. Is I went down to see Dave do a show, and I think I think you were the middle act.
Yeah, I was his feature.
Yeah. And I didn't know that you were doing comedy. And I'm sitting there. My son was a young adult at the time. We went down to watch the show, and I said, Jack, I used to work with that woman. Now she's a comedian, and she's really funny. And
she wasn't funny in the newsroom. She was just stressed out.
So I mean, and that's where that's Sharon, and she's doing comedy. That's so awesome. And I'm glad that you've had such a great career at that for so many years, Sharon.
It's amazing going to Iraq, entertaining our troops on 2 different tours, and performing all over the U.S., headlining, and other countries, and 4 tours of Africa. It's been a truly amazing, gratifying, wonderful adventure.
Awesome. Well, I'm here to volunteer to be your featured act someday. So.
All right. Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be a blast. That would be a blast. What else do you want to know about?
Gosh, there's so many things that you have. What would you say, who is your favorite person to work? Well, I don't know if that'd be a good question to ask you, because they're all watching. I shouldn't say who's your favorite, because they're all so good. What about interviewing, whether it was in sports or news? Can you think of people that you've interviewed that really stand out to you?
Wow. Well, on AM Northwest, you got to interview a lot of people, sometimes via satellite, which wasn't quite as intimate, but in person was always kind of fun. So, some of our, heroes were coming through. Like I interviewed Jack Klugman with Helen on AM Northwest,
wow.
the actor who was, a longtime actor and was, part of the Odd Couple, and Tony Orlando and Don came through, and then Peter Yarrow of Peter, Paul and Mary.
Oh wow!
Was a guest once, and he was a hoot. And I kind of yeah, I learned to play guitar when I was, in college, and I loved folk music. So Peter, Paul and Mary's music was really cool. It was kind of simple. You could play it, and I really
Yeah.
liked that era of music. And so he was a hero of mine, and he came in. He was kind of old enough where he didn't really care. uh, he was a great interview and he was fun, but he didn't really care about the structure of the show. And he kind of took it over, we were trying to wrap up the interview and go to a new segment or like get a commercial, and he kept going and stuff like, he's saying, forget that. Let me tell you about this and that and that.
Oh no.
And I think he played a song with I think some of his family members lived in Portland. And that's why he was there, and he was singing with some family members, and he was all done, and we applauded, and we're about ready to wrap. He said, "Hey, let's do another one," and he
Oh. Oh.
so he was
And the
cool.
floor director is going.
Yeah, right. He basically took over the show. And it's, when I did sports, you got to interview some major sports figures. I have a picture of me interviewing Patrick Ewing during his rookie year,
Mhm.
that somebody took, and it's kind of cool. The opportunity of our business, you had access to the Kenny Loggins of the world and that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
you had to make sure you did your job and did it well, but you're also sometimes, wow, I can't believe that I'm
Yeah.
interviewing this person, and
Or involved in major news stories like the Oklahoma City bombing. Didn't that happen about the same time that you were?
Uh,
Uh,
yeah, and my association with that story was, when that thing happens, an event like that, like the January 6th Capitol riot, or major stories happen like that around the country. I remember being in the newsroom when the Iraq War started, the first Iraq War, and we all knew it was coming because they moved the troops there. But I can remember just standing there and seeing the bombs, drop in Iraq because of the cameras in Baghdad, and basically national news takes over,
yeah.
or September 11th takes over for 24 hours, 48 hours, and you're lucky as a local news agency to get some things in, but everything that you're covering has a link to that major story.
Mhm.
You're looking for local angles. Who's going there to help? Who's an expert that can tell you about things? So on the Oklahoma City bombing, I went to the airport. We did a story on a local dog search guy, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's can be litigious.
Oh,
But he raised money so he could go help search at the bombing site, and we went to the airport and interviewed this person with their dog as they got on the airplane. So I mean, it's a great local link to this story, is we're sending somebody like this. But and then we were there when they came back, and he gave this very emotional interview about not finding anybody alive. But at the same time this was happening, we got word from basically the state search dog certification people that this guy wasn't really what he said he was.
Mm.
So here we're covering the help that's going on, but we're also looking into what might be fraudulent behavior.
Mhm.
And so I spent about 2 days on the phone checking. The guy gave us a big list of things that he had done, his accomplishments of finding things and helping law enforcement. Well, I started checking all those things, and I started to find out that what he was claiming he could do and what the law enforcement said, they said that's not true. And
Uh,
and and some of them even just laughed at the mention of his exaggeration of the help. And I actually got on the phone with somebody from uh, FEMA has trained certified search crews that come to these kind of events.
mhm.
Uh, he was not part of that, and the Oregon search dog community basically had shunned him, and they were telling us, "Listen, this is not right." I got on the phone with somebody from a Sacramento search team that said, "Yeah, the guy kind of piggybacked with our group. He didn't have the right
Mm.
credentials, and he went in."
Oh, geez.
And they actually shut down the whole site because the president was coming, and they had this uncertified guy they didn't know about roaming around and things like that. So I had I had a story,
Uh-huh.
and I had people interviewed on the phone, and all this kind of stuff. and that basically said that that what was, I hesitate to say fraudulent, but what, this guy probably shouldn't have been there, and probably took some donations from people to go there to pay for the trip. And I mean, this was going to be a pretty major story, and it was going to need lawyers, and it was going to need a whole stuff. And the same news director that we've previously talked about said, I mean, 2 days of work, and
Mhm.
I wasn't an investigative reporter like, you know, Kyle Boshi and Pat Doris and many of the great reporters, Don Reese, and um, uh, and so and he killed the story.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, it's not that I don't think it's a good story. I just think at this time people are healing from this tragic event, and we don't want to dogpile on it.
So to speak.
Yeah. Um, well, as it turned out, within a few, not long, the Oregon Justice Department investigated this person and sanctioned him. And and I'm going to qualify. I don't have the greatest memory for exactly what happened, but basically he had a charity and a business where he made money helping people search for lost pets and things like that. And he was disciplined and had to. He couldn't do what he was doing anymore. He had to separate the businesses, and basically they found some evidence of misbehavior or fraudulent,
Mhm.
and I think it had to do with the money and things. You know,
Yeah.
him taking money from people and saying he could go find things. He had to rearrange his business model, whatever, because what he was doing
Yeah.
was not, you know. So um,
Well,
that,
maybe his heart was in the right place, but the money got involved, and
yeah,
it, rough.
there's the benefit of the doubt there, and there's
Mhm.
been a lot of controversy about that. And
Yeah.
we never did the story, but anytime you know, he would come up in these searches, there was a red flag that came up and said, you know, we don't want to interview him, you know, we don't want to help promote because there's things like that. So that happened.
Yeah. Uh, I know we're going to probably be running short on time, but I was just wondering if you could tell me about the OHSU's transplant programs. You were embedded in that, or what was that? Tell me about that.
Brian Robertson, another great photographer, and I, we wanted to do a story on OHSU's transplant program in the 90s, which was really groundbreaking.
Hmm.
Heart transplants, liver transplants, all kinds of things. And so we presented it to the hospital. Said, we want to show what you're doing, but we want to be right there. And so they agreed, and we had pagers, and they set us up with some people who were waiting for liver transplants. And we would go interview them, show what their life was like, and then when they got the call that their liver was ready, we got the call. So
Hmm.
we got to the hospital and followed their recovery, and that. We also got the call to hop on an airplane and fly from Portland to Spokane with a surgical team that was going to go there and harvest a donor heart from somebody who had died, take it to Portland, and give it to somebody that was on their heart transplant list. Um, and so we did those 3 or 4 stories like that. Unfortunately, with the liver transplant, the first person that we embedded with uh, did not survive.
Oh.
Actually had a stroke during the process and was he survived, but in an incapacitated
Mm.
state for several
Oh
months and then passed
gosh.
away.
Oh.
And I can remember going into my news director, different one, one with some compassion, uh, and I told him what happened. I said, I don't know what to do with the story now, because in my mind there was no happy ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to his credit, he said, well, you still got to do the story because that's part of what happens.
It's the story.
Yeah. And we did that. We did that story, and then Sharon, unfortunately, we did another story with another liver transplant, and he only lasted a couple of months afterwards and passed away as well. So it wasn't a happy ending story all the time, but hopefully it showed the life giving capability of that program, and hopefully got people to sign up to be donors, which is where the benefit was.
Right.
I was lucky enough to be, cover Craig Walker's transplant, not embedded, but as everybody else did it. And I've stayed in touch with Craig and did several stories with him. And, he's lived decades afterwards, and that's great.
And I enjoyed his podcast with you.
Yeah, he's a great man.
Guesting on your show.
Then one of the stories we did a little bit while later was, one of the things was, when you did a transplant, they let you write letters to the donor family to express your gratitude, and the donor family could write letters to the receiving family, telling them things about the person that they had benefited from. But those people never met. But as the program evolved, they started to let people meet, and they only did it after a certain amount of time and a certain amount of counseling on both ends. And they invited us to be part of that once. And I remember I was anchoring the morning news. And so I'd done the show, and then the meeting was in the afternoon. So I was still in the newsroom at like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And the anchor at the time was Jim Beneman, and Jim goes, anytime I was in the newsroom afternoon, it was like, what the heck's going on? Because I in the morning. Jim goes, what the heck's going on? I said, well, I got a really good story that I'm working on and I wanted to do. And so Brian and I go, we sit there with these families that embrace, and they tell stories about the person who passed away and the person who now has their heart. And it was this emotional juggernaut of an experience. And it was this wonderful story. And we had pictures of the donor, which was she was an 18 or 19 young woman, and she was beautiful. And her family told these great stories about her before she died in this car accident. And here's this, 30-some-year-old man that's alive because of it. It was one of those stories that you just, it makes your career as far as remembering. And so it was a great story. And then Jim Beneman types me this email, and he afterwards he goes, Carl, you told me you were working on a really good story, and you were right. That was a really good story. That was really nice of Jim to do that. So,
well, you've had an amazing life, an amazing career, and we're all lucky for that. And we're very lucky that you've been part of our lives, and the viewers have been lucky too.
So let me tell you how it ended.
Yes. Oh, that wasn't the ending?
Well, so I was at KATU for 9 years. Hosted AM Northwest and anchored the morning news and some of the noon news. And I worked with Helen and Angelica Thornton and Natalie Marmion, and they were great. We had a good time. And we got bought out by a new company, which was Sinclair. Sinclair, a very conservative group that owns a lot of TV stations. And that had nothing to do with me leaving, but we got bought out by them. And we had a brand new news director there. And she, you could tell she kind of wanted to make her mark with this new company and her new bosses. And they had this retreat or something about how they were going to do the morning news differently. And they did it. And they did invite the news anchors who were part of it. They did invite Natalie and I and Rhonda. So what came out of that meeting was that they wanted the news anchors, Carl and Natalie and Rhonda, to be there sooner in the morning. We got to work about 3-something, maybe 3:15, and the show started at 4:30. So we were really good at getting in, going over the material, asking questions, being prepared for newscast, and starting at 4:30. And a lot of the stuff for the later newscast is happening and being created while we're on the air. Because East Coast news starts happening. And well, instead of that, they wanted us to be in the office at 2:00 in the morning. And they said, camera ready. Camera ready at 2:00. So that would have mean, for Natalie, Natalie would get in there and she would do her hair and makeup. She was really good at doing it fast. My pattern was I would get there and I would actually take a shower at the station very quick and get ready. I did that so I wouldn't wake up my wife at home. I got up and got in. But no, they wanted us there at 2:00 at camera ready, which means all the prep was happening at home, which means you're probably getting out of bed at 1:00.
Have they ever worked in TV before? I mean,
and the thing was all they wanted was they wanted to get rid of one writer and get us in there to start writing material. And there was no material to write at that time of the day. Like, as I said, nothing really started happening until after 4 when the newscast was going.
Yeah.
And they thought us being more involved in the show was going to help give it some more, whatever. And all it was going to do was make us dead tired.
Yeah.
And I pretty much, and also I called around because I knew Brenda and and nobody else was getting in at any time other than when we were getting in, at 3:00, 3:15. Everybody else in the market was doing the same thing. And so I basically said, she told us about this, and then she called us in to talk about it. I said, I'm not going to do it. And she just said, well, you have to do it. You're under contract. I said, well, I'm not going to do it. What are you going to do if I come in late? You're going to fire me? Or are you going to suspend me? And she goes, well, you're under contract. I said, well, and then after it just really ticked her off because she was doing a power play with her new bosses, and I really felt bad for Natalie because she had younger kids at that time, and there was no way she was going to get to bed before 9:00, and it was just going to kill her anyway. But and so that didn't end well. So I went down to the general manager, who could have put his foot down and said, no, this is a stupid idea. We're not going to do this, but he didn't. And I said, well, then I'm going to retire. Because he and I had talked about it. The news in the morning started at 6 a.m. and then they moved it to 5:30 and 5 and 4:30. And I basically just said, if we ever go earlier than 4:30, I can't do that. And so he kind of negotiated it. And so I'm going to retire because I'm not coming in early, which was fine with me because I only had a year or so left on my contract, and my wife and I had agreed this was going to be it. So I didn't have any problem. I'd done what I wanted to do. And so then we got into this meeting with the news director to finalize the arrangement for me to retire. And he wasn't there. He was on the phone because he was traveling. And before it started, I basically, I bared my soul to this woman. I said, I really don't want to disappoint you, and I'm sad that this is the case, but for health reasons, I can't do this. I mean, my dad died of a heart attack at 60 years old, and the stress this would put on me, I just can't do it. And it would be bad for my marriage if I'm going to bed at 6:00 instead of 9:00. And I just said, I'm not going to do that. And she listened to that. And then the meeting starts when the guy calls in. And she started the meeting by saying, okay, I just want to start, John and Carl, by saying, I've never been more disappointed in a newsroom leader in my career. I just bared my soul to this woman and basically threw out an olive branch. I didn't want to make, I could have
a lot of other things you could have said.
Yeah, or could have done, I could have, I could have, gone on with it and come in late every day and got into this, and I regret not stopping at that point and saying to the guy on the phone, saying, I'm not going to listen to this, John. I'm leaving. When you get back, we'll talk about this and we'll finalize it. I should have done that. That's one of those things, but I didn't. And basically they finalized, they gave me a date when I had to sign, some paperwork, and they gave me a date, which was a month out, that I would stick around for. And then I agreed that I had to go to all the consultant meetings because there was a consultant coming to town. Even though I was leaving in a month, she wanted me to go talk to the consultant. So we came to that arrangement, and actually it was more than a month. It was about 6 to 7 weeks that I stuck around. And I said, I'll stay around as long as you want me until you can find my replacement, but I'm not coming in early.
Did Natalie come in early?
Well, because I wasn't going to, they didn't enforce it with the rest of the crew. Yeah. So I worked the next 6 or 7 weeks. I never called in sick. I went into all the consultant meetings. In fact, one meeting, the consultant changed the time. We were supposed to do it at noon, and she said, how about you, Natalie, come in and we'll do it at 11 or something like that. So we did it. We did everything, and then we left. And I got an email from this news director at home saying, you were supposed to be in a meeting at noon with the consultant, and that was part of our deal. And something I said, she changed the time, and we did the meeting at 11. It was all done, and we shook hands and everything. And I never got oh, I'm sorry or anything out of this person I was dealing with. She also, we had a story up for an Emmy Award. A photographer and I, Paul Stews, did a story that was going to get entered by the station for the Emmys.
Mhm.
And the day after that we agreed to the contract, me retiring, she sent me another email, said, your story will no longer be part of the station's entry to the Emmys. So
Wow.
basically, out of spite,
Yeah.
it had
What a
already
good
been
person, huh?
it already been selected to be one of the entries, and then she
Mhm.
took it out. So the photographer and I had to pay to enter it, and we did, and it won.
And you won.
Um, and
Oh, wow.
so on my last day, it was kind of a goodbye part of the show, but I was clear to the general manager, and part of the arrangement was, I don't want a big goodbye. I don't want to, I don't want KATU says goodbye to Carl Click, because KATU wasn't really doing that. KATU had set an unrealistic expectation, and I feel like I had given them an out, which is the retirement. So I didn't want a big show about it. And I was specific. I don't want any goodbyes from, Steve Dunn, and I don't want, any. Well, they did some of that. The news director, there was some goodbye from somebody at, Good Morning America. Congratulations, Carl. And when I got there that morning, I found out about it. I told the producer, I said, you're not running that, because I had agreed. My agreement was that would not happen. And he says, well, she told me I had to run it. I said, you're not running it, because
Is she going to fire you?
if you run it, I will leave the newscast, and you will have a goodbye Carl without Carl. I didn't want to play that card, and I don't know, but so anyway, so we had a goodbye. They had a cake. It was all nice. I got to say goodbye to my friends and coworkers, and they let me say a little something to the audience, and that was great. That's all I wanted. And then we had a little gathering in the newsroom afterwards, where there was cake and all that kind of stuff. And my family came, and my wife and my 2 kids were there. And then the news director came up and said, "Oh, well, let's talk in your office. Can you come talk in my office?" I said, "Okay." I just took my kids and my adult kids and my wife and said goodbye, and I went back in the office. After doing all this stuff and never calling in sick and going to all the meetings, she said, "I need your badge and your coat and your phone."
Wow.
I said, "Well, I left my badge at Human Services, and my phone and my jacket are on Eric's desk, because he was the operations manager." I said, "Anything else?" She said, "No." And I walked out.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
That just makes me sick. That makes me sick. But some
well,
of the egos in the business, I'm so sorry. And
but
I'm so glad that,
you don't have to be, Sharon, because the people that meant something to me, I got to say goodbye with the right way, and it was just par for the course. It's a better story to tell now than it's. And as I said, I was ready to leave. It was
it just
okay.
says a lot about her. Yeah.
Well,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, she moved on to oh no, here's the best part of the story, and then we'll be done. So
Okay.
Lincoln Graves filled in for a few weeks until they got the guy that they hired to save the morning show to replace Carl. and then they had to delay his start, because he had his mom was sick, and he had to wait a few more. He had to take care of her, so he didn't get there for like 2 months. And then when he got there, and they told him what time they had to start, he said, "I'm not doing that." And so the exact reason that I agreed to
Yes,
leave
that they lost you.
never ever got started, never it became policy, never became the time. And
Wow.
and that guy lasted about 3 months on the air. He was so abrasive to the audience and to the people he was working with that he left. And Lincoln got the job, which was great, and Lincoln did it for several years.
Wow. Well, it's these stories have been amazing, and I'm so glad that we got this time to talk. Thank you.
Sharon, I'm glad that you did this, because I love reconnecting with people that have been part of the career. So I appreciate you being the podcast host today.
Thank you. Thank you for the honor.
All